So hey guys, that was my little intro there. That was a part of the intro of the original Monsters Inc. And the reasoning for that was because the new Monsters film came out recently, Monsters University. So I kind of just wanted to have some type of musical score from the original film before this video started. So there it was. So in Monsters University, you guys, it's actually a prequel. It is a story that happens before Monsters Inc. even happened, where how Mike and Sulley met in college, how they became friends, why they're so close in the original film, and we get to see as the viewer how that story came to be, why Randall was kind of this, how Randall became the villain for the first film. Um, so there's some establishment that happens throughout this film that's all about that, how Mike and Sully are the way they are, why they warm up the way they do and everything else. So in this film, you guys, we first see Mike as a young little monster, and we see through a school field trip that he really wants to become a scare due to all the things he's seeing at the Monsters Inc. Corporation. So he's really intrigued by it, and he really wants to become a scarer. And so he goes to Monsters University and hopes to become a scarer. He majors in scaring there. And he later meets up with Sully, who we know from the first film. Sully is a natural at scaring. Um, his family, he comes from a family of big time scarers. So Sully goes into Monsters University with a big name on his hand, and so a lot of people expect a lot of things from him. Um, Being that Sully, it comes naturally to Sully. Sully he's kind of in the party zone for a while. He doesn't really focus on his schoolwork. Mike studies like crazy, has a huge heart, really wants to be a scarer. But the problem is he's not very scary, even though he knows everything from the book. Um, so Mike's getting good grades in all his classes. Sully's kind of, barely hanging in there. He's just kind of in the party zone still, just holding on to the scares that he knows what to do with, and isn't really familiar with different kind of scares that Monsters University wants him to know. So after a while, both Mike and Sully get into big trouble. It's a vandalism related thing that I don't want to spoil. But basically, the headmistress creates a bet with both Mike and Sully, and if they lose, basically both of them get kicked off of Monsters University. Um, and so they become a part of something called the Scare Games, which proves that you're the scariest monster on campus, that you have the scariest team on campus because there's some team related events. So Mike and Sully use this as kind of this opportunity to get the headmistress to keep them on campus and prove that they can be these big time scarers when they move out and find a career. And so throughout the film, it's basically Mike and Sully, forming a friendship. Um, because throughout the film, that they don't really know how to feel around each other. They're kind of both enemies and friends. They have to get through these events together in order to basically keep their place on campus. So there's a bunch of things that happen throughout this film, and it all basically you'll find out throughout the film. It later contributes to how Monsters Inc. started. So Monsters University, you guys, I thought this was a great prequel. I've always been a fan of Pixar. There's a few films from them that I'm not too big on. But like for example, I love the Toy Story trilogy. All three of those are great. I love Monsters Inc. I love Incredibles. I love Finding Nemo. So there's a ton of films that they offer that I really really like, and Monsters University is definitely going to be one of those films. Um, so for positives and negatives, you guys, I thought this film was a great setup to the first film. It definitely established why certain things were the way they were. So the film did a terrific job with that. Several Monsters Inc. characters that you recognize from the first film appear in this film if you really look closely. Some of them have cameos who are the really, really important characters from the first film. Um, but Mike, Sully, and Randall, they definitely are in this film for sure. So if you like those three characters, they definitely get, well, actually, I'll get to Randall in a little bit, but if you like those three monsters from the first film, you won't be disappointed. Um, there was some great new monsters in here. There was actually a monster I really liked. He kind of had like these arm-like things as legs, and then he had little tiny skinny arms as arms. Um, for some reason, I could connect with that guy. He was kind of the hippie on campus. He kind of adventured around. He has all these stories to tell, and people have no idea how he's had that experience and stuff. So he was just kind of a really interesting character. And if you were a monster at this campus, you almost wanted to be his friend just because you could have some unique experiences with this guy. Um, the voice acting in this film was great. Even though Pixar has had a lot of really good voice acting in their previous films, also for this film specifically, my parents and myself and my brother and I, because we all saw this as a family, we were really impressed by the voice acting in this. I mean, for being in a booth where you have to provide your voice to a microphone, there was some really good interaction with some of these characters. So either they edited that really well, or like I said, maybe just they got a really talented voice crew for this film, and it really paid off because the collaboration and the interaction with these characters was just as interactive as a really well done live action film. Um, Very entertaining film. There was some great animation in here. So if you're looking for entertainment and if you're looking for really good animation, Monsters University has both of those things. It's very good with both of those. Um, there was actually some occasional surprise scares in this. I could even hear some people in the audience every once in a while like, "Wow, that actually kind of was a little scary." So as far as like when they're learning how to scare the little kids from the first film, there was some scenes in here where they definitely took a much darker route than you would imagine with a Monsters Inc. film, and even though it always kind of ends up comedically like it has with the first film, when they're actually setting it up to make it look like this big scary thing. Um, it was a little scary. And what was kind of cool too is there was even a scene in here that reminded me of Friday the 13th because they're at like this camp thing at one point. Um, but yeah, it was just there was some things in here where it just like you could definitely tell that they were aiming for that whole scary monster look, and they definitely really accomplished that. Um, for the negatives, you guys, overall, even though I loved this film, I still think the first Monsters Inc. film is a much better film overall. So this film isn't as good in that department. I didn't think this film was as funny as the first film either. I think the first film definitely had some funnier material and was just an overall better film. But this film was great though. But as far as negatives go, I will say I think I do like the first Monsters Inc. film better. Um, and this is where I was talking about with Randall earlier. One of the negatives I had is I felt Randall felt underdeveloped in here, and he really wasn't used that much. They really didn't use him a lot. They called him Randy in here, so unless if you really know that character, you're gonna So it's like, for example, if you didn't see the first Monsters Inc., you're not going to know that that's Randall when you see it later on, unless if you look at the body design really closely. So they call him Randy in here, and they don't really use him a lot. Even though it is briefly set up, why he hates Mike and Sulley in the first film and why he becomes the villain later on. Besides that one scene, I mean, they really didn't do a lot with him. We just kind of saw him every once in a while. He did team up with the villain of this film for a little bit, but we just really didn't see him a lot. And I think because he was such an important character in Monsters Inc., I think it would have been a better idea if they gave him more to do in this film because we really didn't get a lot of Randall time in this film. Um, Also, I thought the overall villain, he was kind of this bully of this, like, kind of like, the football team, and he was just kind of the jock of the college. Um, I thought he was a really forgettable villain. I mean, it's just like we've seen that kind of villain a million times. And basically he's in the film just to give Mike and Sully another conflict. And even though that's fine for storytelling, they had to figure out ways for conflict to happen in a prequel. Because with prequels you got to keep certain things open, and you got to make sure it works well for that story that's told later on. In this case, Monsters Inc. And because of that, I think they just ran into a generic villain route because they didn't want to take it too far with anything. Um, yeah, I thought just the villain they used in this was just really forgettable. So villain wise, this film didn't do so great. The Helen Mirren headmistress, she was kind of a villain. She was decent. But yeah, I mean, I think villain wise, I think the first film was better also. But overall, guys, I do give Monsters University a 9 out of 10. I think this is an excellent film, one of the better animated films we got so far this year. I won't be shocked if I put this in my top 10 actually by the end of the year. Really well done movie, really well done prequel. It set things up for the original Monsters Inc. really well. A lot of fun with this film. If you have kids, Your kids are going to love this film if you take them to this film. If you like Pixar animation, you're going to love this film. It's really well done. So, like I said, 9 out of 10 for me, you guys. I thought Monsters University was a very well done prequel.